The Florida sun was mercilessly bright as Alan Jackson walked across the pristine grounds of the exclusive Ritz-Carlton resort in Naples, his worn cowboy boots clicking against the imported Italian marble that lined the pathways between manicured tropical gardens and sculptured fountains. It was July of 2015, and the country music legend had been looking forward to this family vacation for months, a rare opportunity to escape the demanding schedule of touring and recording that had consumed most of his year. At 56 years old, Alan had achieved everything there was to achieve in country music, but he had never lost his appreciation for the simple pleasure of spending time with his wife, Denise, and their 3 daughters. The resort had been Denise's choice, selected from a collection of luxury travel magazines that featured destinations favored by celebrities, Fortune 500 executives, and wealthy business magnates who demanded the finest accommodations money could provide. The Ritz-Carlton Naples was renowned for its exclusivity and attention to detail, with room rates that started at $800 per night and suites that could cost several $1,000s for a weekend stay. The clientele consisted primarily of investment bankers from Wall Street, entertainment industry moguls from Hollywood, professional athletes with multi-million-dollar contracts, and the kind of old money families who had been vacationing at exclusive resorts for multiple generations. The resort's reputation for exclusivity was carefully cultivated through marketing materials that emphasized sophistication, refinement, and the kind of cultural experiences that appealed to guests who viewed luxury travel as both recreation and social positioning. The facilities included a championship golf course designed by a legendary architect, a world-class spa that offered treatments utilizing rare ingredients from around the globe, and restaurants helmed by celebrity chefs whose waiting lists for reservations extended months into the future. Alan had been somewhat reluctant to choose such an ostentatious destination, preferring the simpler pleasures of lake houses in the mountains of Tennessee or fishing cabins in rural Georgia that reflected his authentic background and personal values. His success in country music had provided him with significant wealth, earning him millions of dollars from album sales, concert tours, and business ventures. But he had never been comfortable with the kind of conspicuous consumption that characterized the lifestyles of many entertainment industry figures and wealthy celebrities. Throughout his career, Alan had maintained a lifestyle that reflected his rural Georgia upbringing and the values that had been instilled in him by his parents. He drove pickup trucks instead of luxury automobiles, lived in a comfortable but modest home in Nashville that prioritized family spaces over impressive entertaining areas, and generally avoided the kind of flashy displays of wealth that seemed to define celebrity culture in the early 21st century. His wardrobe remained consistent with his authentic identity, featuring jeans, Western shirts, and cowboy boots that were chosen for comfort and practicality rather than fashion statements or image management. The cowboy boots in particular had been a constant in his life since childhood, when they were practical footwear for farm work and outdoor activities rather than costume pieces or marketing tools. However, Denise had convinced him that the family deserved a luxurious vacation after the challenges of the previous year, which had included an extensive touring schedule that had taken him to over 60 cities across North America, the recording and promotion of a new album that had required months of intensive work, and the various business pressures that came with maintaining a successful career in an increasingly competitive and rapidly changing music industry. Their daughters, who ranged in age from 16 to 25, had been looking forward to the vacation for months, researching the resort's amenities and planning activities that would take advantage of the exclusive experiences available to guests. The youngest daughter was particularly excited about the resort's equestrian center, where she could pursue her interest in horseback riding with professional instruction and well-trained animals. The older daughters were interested in the spa treatments and shopping opportunities available in the nearby exclusive boutiques that catered to the resort's affluent clientele. Alan had ultimately agreed that his family deserved the kind of special experience that his success had made possible, recognizing that his reluctance to embrace luxury was sometimes a limitation that prevented his loved ones from enjoying the benefits of his hard work and professional achievements. The decision to book the expensive vacation represented a compromise between his personal preferences for simplicity and his desire to provide his family with memorable experiences. The flight from Nashville to Fort Myers had been uneventful, with Alan traveling under his real name but keeping a low profile to avoid the kind of attention that could disrupt other passengers' travel experience. He had learned over the years that air travel could become complicated when fans recognized him, leading to requests for autographs, photographs, and extended conversations that, while generally pleasant and well-intentioned, could make simple transportation into a lengthy social obligation that affected everyone on the flight. His strategy for maintaining privacy during travel involved dressing casually, avoiding eye contact with other passengers, and generally trying to blend into the crowd of business travelers and vacationing families who filled commercial flights. The approach was usually successful, allowing him to travel without the complications that could arise when his celebrity status became the focus of attention from fellow passengers or airline staff. Upon arriving at the resort, Alan and his family had been impressed by the attention to detail and the obvious quality of the facilities that justified the premium pricing. The lobby was decorated with original artwork by internationally recognized artists and furnished with antiques that had been carefully selected by professional interior designers who specialized in luxury hospitality environments. The staff moved with the kind of practiced efficiency that characterized high-end service industries, anticipating guests' needs and providing assistance that was both professional and unobtrusive. The check-in process had been handled with the kind of discreet efficiency that characterized elite hospitality, with staff members who had been trained to recognize and accommodate the preferences of wealthy guests who expected their privacy and comfort to be prioritized above all other considerations. The family's luggage was handled by uniformed staff members who transported it directly to their suite, eliminating the need for the family to deal with the logistics of moving their belongings through the resort's elaborate facilities. The family's suite overlooked the Gulf of Mexico, with floor-to-ceiling windows that provided spectacular views of the white sand beaches and emerald waters that had made the area famous as a destination for luxury tourism. The accommodations included a private balcony furnished with comfortable seating and dining areas, a sitting room decorated with custom-designed furniture and original artwork, and bathroom fixtures that appeared to be made of solid gold and imported marble. The suite's amenities included a fully stocked bar featuring premium liquors and wines, a refrigerator filled with gourmet snacks and beverages, and access to 24-hour room service from the resort's award-winning restaurants. The level of luxury was something that Alan had encountered occasionally during his career, particularly when staying at high-end hotels in major cities during touring. But he had never become completely comfortable with the extravagance that seemed to define the hospitality industry's approach to wealthy guests. The first 2 days of the vacation had proceeded smoothly, with the family enjoying the resort's various amenities and taking advantage of the exclusive experiences that were available to guests who could afford the premium pricing. Denise had spent time at the spa, enjoying treatments that utilized exotic ingredients and specialized techniques that were not available at typical commercial establishments. The daughters had explored the resort's shopping areas, where exclusive boutiques offered designer clothing and luxury accessories that reflected the tastes and budgets of the resort's affluent clientele. Alan had particularly enjoyed the early morning walks on the beach, when the resort was quiet and he could appreciate the natural beauty of the coastline without the distractions of crowds and commercial activity. The Gulf of Mexico's pristine waters and sugar-white sand beaches provided a peaceful environment that reminded him of the simple pleasures that had always been most important to him, even as his career had provided access to increasingly elaborate and expensive experiences. The resort's championship golf course had provided another opportunity for Alan to enjoy activities that reflected his authentic interests and preferences. The course had been designed by a legendary architect who had created challenging layouts that took advantage of the natural coastal environment while providing the kind of premium experience that justified the resort's exclusive reputation. Playing golf in such beautiful surroundings, without the pressures of his professional schedule, had been one of the vacation's most enjoyable aspects. However, it was on the third day of their stay that the incident occurred that would transform a pleasant family vacation into something much more significant and ultimately inspiring for millions of people around the world. The family had decided to spend the afternoon at the resort's main pool area, a spectacular facility that featured multiple swimming pools designed by internationally recognized architects, private cabanas furnished with luxury amenities, and poolside service that catered to guests' every need with the kind of attention to detail that characterized elite hospitality. The pool complex was designed to impress, with waterfalls, tropical landscaping, and architectural features that created an environment of luxury and exclusivity. The main pool was an Olympic-sized facility, surrounded by comfortable lounge areas where guests could relax while being attended to by staff members who were trained to anticipate and fulfill their every need. Smaller pools provided more intimate settings for families or couples who preferred quieter environments, while a lap pool offered opportunities for exercise and fitness activities. Alan had dressed casually for the pool, wearing swim trunks, a simple t-shirt, and the cowboy boots that had become his signature look both on and off stage throughout his 30-year career in country music. The boots were not an affectation or a costume choice designed for publicity or image management, but a reflection of his authentic background and personal style that had remained consistent despite his fame and commercial success. He had been wearing cowboy boots since childhood in rural Georgia, when they were practical footwear for farm work, outdoor activities, and the kind of physical labor that characterized life in agricultural communities. The boots had continued to be part of his daily wardrobe throughout his career, as a reminder of his roots and values, serving as a connection to his authentic identity that helped him maintain perspective despite the artificial environment of the entertainment industry. The pool area was crowded with resort guests who represented the kind of wealth and status that characterized the facility's typical clientele. Investment bankers from New York lounged in designer swimwear while conducting business calls that involved millions of dollars in transactions. Entertainment industry executives from Los Angeles worked on their tans while reviewing scripts and contracts that could determine the direction of major film and television projects. Professional athletes and their families occupied premium poolside locations while being attended to by personal assistants and resort staff who catered to their every need. The atmosphere was one of casual but unmistakable luxury, with conversations that referenced private jets, multiple homes in exclusive locations, membership in elite country clubs, and the kind of lifestyle choices that were available only to people with significant financial resources and social connections. The guests moved through the pool area with the confidence that came from knowing they belonged in such exclusive surroundings, displaying the kind of casual entitlement that characterized people who had never been denied access to any experience or location based on their economic status. The resort staff moved through the area providing towels, drinks, and snacks to guests who clearly expected and received the highest level of personal service. The employees were trained to be virtually invisible while anticipating guests' needs, creating an environment where wealthy patrons could enjoy luxury without having to acknowledge the human labor that made their comfort possible. Alan and his family found available lounge chairs near the main pool and settled in for what they expected to be a relaxing afternoon of swimming and sunbathing in the Florida sunshine. Denise had brought several magazines to read, including fashion publications and lifestyle magazines that featured articles about luxury travel, designer fashion, and the kind of cultural experiences that appealed to affluent consumers. Their daughters were eager to enjoy the pool's various features, including a spectacular waterfall, a swim-up bar that served tropical drinks and light meals, and access to water sports equipment that was provided complimentary to resort guests. For the first hour, everything proceeded normally and pleasantly. The family enjoyed the pool's amenities, with Alan swimming laps in the Olympic-sized pool, while his wife and daughters relaxed in the sun and enjoyed the attentive service provided by the resort staff. The environment was peaceful and luxurious, exactly what they had hoped for when planning the vacation and deciding to invest in such an expensive but exclusive experience. Alan particularly enjoyed the swimming, finding that the physical activity and the peaceful environment of the pool provided a welcome break from the mental pressures and constant decision-making that characterized his professional life. The clear, warm water of the Gulf Coast and the beautiful weather created ideal conditions for relaxation and family time that had become increasingly rare in his busy schedule. However, the situation began to change when other guests started to notice Alan's presence, and more specifically, his appearance and the cultural markers that distinguished him from the typical resort clientele. His cowboy boots, which he had left beside his lounge chair while swimming, seemed to attract attention and whispered comments from nearby guests who were clearly unfamiliar with country music culture and the authentic lifestyle that those boots represented. The boots were well-worn and practical rather than decorative or fashionable, clearly intended for actual use rather than fashion statements or costume purposes. They showed the kind of wear patterns that came from years of regular use, with scuff marks and weathering that indicated they were functional footwear rather than expensive accessories. Against the backdrop of designer sandals, expensive athletic shoes, and luxury fashion accessories that characterized the footwear of other guests, Alan's boots stood out dramatically as markers of a different cultural background and set of values. The attention began as curious glances and whispered conversations between guests who seemed puzzled by the presence of someone whose appearance and cultural markers did not match their expectations for the exclusive resort environment. The conversations were conducted in the kind of stage whispers that were intended to be overheard, creating an atmosphere of judgment and exclusion that was designed to make Alan and his family feel unwelcome and out of place. Alan became aware of the negative attention when he overheard a conversation between two men who appeared to be business executives, based on their expensive clothing, perfectly groomed appearance, and the kind of confident body language that characterized people who were accustomed to wielding significant power and influence in corporate environments. They were discussing his presence in terms that were both condescending and dismissive, making it clear that they viewed him as an intruder who did not understand the social expectations and cultural norms of exclusive resort environments. The men spoke about how some people clearly did not understand the dress code and social expectations of luxury hospitality establishments, making references to hillbillies and country bumpkins who had apparently won the lottery or achieved sudden wealth and were trying to enjoy lifestyles they did not understand or deserve. Their comments reflected the kind of cultural prejudice that dismissed entire regions and communities as somehow inferior or unsophisticated. The assumptions underlying their conversation revealed a worldview that equated wealth with sophistication and viewed rural or working-class cultural markers as indicators of inferiority or inappropriateness. The men seemed to believe that exclusive resorts should serve as spaces where people like themselves could avoid contact with individuals from different cultural backgrounds or economic circumstances. The comments were not directed at Alan personally, as the men did not appear to recognize him as a successful entertainer or realize that his presence at the resort was justified by his own significant wealth and professional achievements. Instead, they were making judgments based purely on his appearance and the cultural markers that identified him as someone from a rural or working-class background. Initially, Alan chose to ignore the comments, focusing instead on enjoying time with his family and not allowing the narrow-mindedness of strangers to interfere with their vacation. He had encountered similar attitudes throughout his career, particularly when traveling to markets outside of country music's traditional geographic base, and he had learned that the best response was usually to maintain his dignity and continue being authentic to his own values and identity. His strategy for dealing with prejudice and cultural discrimination had always been to demonstrate through his behavior and character that the assumptions underlying such attitudes were incorrect and unfair. Rather than arguing with people who held narrow-minded views, he preferred to let his actions speak for themselves, trusting that decent people would eventually recognize their mistakes and adjust their attitudes accordingly. However, the situation escalated when a resort employee approached their family's seating area with an apologetic but firm demeanor that indicated she was acting on instructions from management. The employee, who identified herself as a pool supervisor, explained that there had been complaints from other guests about inappropriate attire and behavior that was not consistent with the resort's standards and expectations for the kind of sophisticated environment that justified their premium pricing. She specifically mentioned the cowboy boots, suggesting that they were not appropriate poolside footwear and might be disturbing other guests who expected a certain level of sophistication and cultural refinement in their resort experience. The employee was polite but persistent, clearly acting on instructions from management who had received complaints from guests who felt that Alan's presence was somehow diminishing their own experience and the exclusive atmosphere they expected when paying premium prices for luxury accommodations. The conversation took place within earshot of other guests, creating an embarrassing spectacle that drew attention from throughout the pool area. Alan could see people watching the interaction with expressions that ranged from curiosity to amusement, clearly enjoying the drama of someone being called out for failing to meet the resort's unwritten social standards and cultural expectations. The public nature of the confrontation was clearly intentional, designed to humiliate Alan and his family while sending a message to other guests that the resort management was committed to maintaining the kind of exclusive environment that justified their premium pricing. The approach reflected a hospitality philosophy that prioritized the comfort of certain types of guests over basic principles of respect and human dignity. Denise was clearly upset by the situation, pointing out that they were paying customers who had followed all stated resort policies and had done nothing to disturb other guests or violate any written rules or regulations. She noted that there were no posted dress codes that prohibited cowboy boots and that her husband's behavior had been exemplary throughout their stay at the resort. Their daughters were embarrassed and confused by the confrontation, unable to understand why their father was being singled out for criticism when he had done nothing wrong and was clearly a legitimate guest who had paid for access to the resort's facilities. The situation was particularly difficult for the youngest daughter, who had been enjoying the vacation and was now witnessing her father being subjected to public humiliation based on prejudice and narrow-mindedness. The pool supervisor acknowledged that there were no written policies that specifically prohibited cowboy boots or other forms of casual footwear, but she explained that the resort maintained certain standards of atmosphere and ambiance that required management to address situations that might be disruptive to other guests' enjoyment of their expensive vacation experience. The explanation revealed the subjective and discriminatory nature of the resort's enforcement policies. She suggested that Alan might be more comfortable at the resort's more casual pool area, which was located away from the main facility and was typically used by families with young children and guests who preferred a less formal environment. The alternative location was clearly intended to serve as a form of segregation that would allow Alan to remain at the resort while minimizing his contact with guests who found his presence objectionable. The suggestion was delivered politely, but the underlying message was unmistakable. He was being told that he did not belong in the same spaces as the resort's more desirable clientele. The proposal created a separate but unequal arrangement that violated basic principles of equal treatment and human dignity, while allowing the resort to avoid the negative publicity that might result from completely excluding a paying guest. Alan felt a familiar anger rising in his chest, the same emotion he had experienced as a young man when people had dismissed his musical ambitions or suggested that country music was somehow inferior to other genres. It was the anger that came from being judged based on superficial characteristics rather than personal worth, from having his dignity questioned by people who knew nothing about his character, accomplishments, or values. The emotion was intensified by the fact that his family was witnessing the discrimination and humiliation, making the incident not just a personal affront, but an attack on the people he loved most. His daughters were seeing their father treated with disrespect and prejudice, potentially learning lessons about social hierarchies and cultural discrimination that could affect their own understanding of human dignity and equal treatment. But along with the anger that naturally arose from such treatment, Alan felt something else developing. A recognition that this moment presented an opportunity to demonstrate the values that had guided his life and career. He could respond with anger and confrontation, demanding to speak with management and threatening legal action for discrimination. Such a response would be justified and might result in immediate vindication, but it would also reinforce the adversarial dynamic that had been created by the prejudiced guests and resort management. Alternatively, he could find a way to turn this moment of humiliation into something positive that might change the attitudes of the people who were witnessing it. This approach would require him to rise above the natural human impulse for retaliation, and instead demonstrate the kind of grace and generosity that could transform hearts and minds more effectively than any argument or legal action. The decision that formed in Alan's mind was not calculated for maximum impact or public relations benefit, but came from his genuine character and the values that had been instilled in him during his childhood in rural Georgia. His parents had taught him that the best response to prejudice and narrow-mindedness was not anger or retaliation, but grace and generosity that could transform situations and potentially change people's perspectives about their own attitudes and behaviors. Standing up from his lounge chair with the quiet dignity that had characterized his entire career, Alan addressed the pool supervisor in a voice that was calm, but carried enough authority to draw the attention of nearby guests who had been watching the confrontation unfold. He thanked her for her concern and acknowledged that he understood the resort's desire to maintain certain standards. But he also made it clear that he was a legitimate guest who had every right to enjoy the facilities he had paid to access. Rather than argue about policies or threaten complaints to management, Alan made a different choice that would surprise everyone present and ultimately change the entire dynamic of the situation. He asked the pool supervisor to gather all of the pool staff who were working that afternoon, explaining that he wanted to express his appreciation for their service and professionalism in a way that would demonstrate his respect for their hard work and dedication. The request seemed unusual to the pool supervisor, who was clearly expecting a different kind of response to the discrimination, and was unsure how to handle Alan's unexpected approach to the situation. However, she complied with his request, calling together the dozen or so staff members who were responsible for maintaining the pool area and serving the needs of resort guests throughout the afternoon. What happened next surprised everyone in the pool area, including Alan's own family members who had not been consulted about his plans and were unsure what he intended to accomplish by gathering the resort staff. He introduced himself to the assembled employees not as a celebrity or successful entertainer, but simply as a guest who appreciated their hard work and dedication to providing excellent service in a demanding environment. He spoke about the importance of hospitality and service, acknowledging that their work made it possible for families like his to enjoy memorable experiences together, while creating the kind of welcoming environment that distinguished excellent resorts from merely expensive ones. His comments revealed an understanding of the hospitality industry and an appreciation for the human labor that made luxury experiences possible. Then, reaching into his wallet, Allen began distributing tips to each staff member that far exceeded anything they had ever received from resort guests. He gave each employee $500 in cash, explaining that he wanted them to know that their service was valued and appreciated by guests who understood the importance of their contributions to the resort's success. The tips totaled over $6,000, representing more money than most of the staff members earned in several weeks of work at the resort. The amount was significant not just for its size, but for what it represented: a recognition of the staff members' worth as human beings and an acknowledgement that their labor deserved to be compensated and appreciated rather than simply taken for granted. The gesture was not performed for dramatic effect or public attention, but was delivered with the kind of genuine warmth and appreciation that characterized Allen's interactions with people throughout his life. He spoke with each staff member individually, asking about their families and their experiences working at the resort, treating them as valuable human beings rather than invisible service providers whose presence was only noticed when something went wrong. His conversations with the staff members revealed his authentic interest in their lives and circumstances, demonstrating that his generosity was not just financial but personal. He asked about their career goals, their families, and their experiences serving the resort's demanding clientele, showing genuine concern for their well-being and professional development. The impact of Allen's gesture was immediate and profound. The pool area, which had been buzzing with conversations about his inappropriate presence and the need for standards and exclusivity, fell into stunned silence as guests witnessed a display of generosity that none of them had ever seen at the resort or any similar facility. The staff members were clearly moved by both the financial gift and the personal attention, with several of them openly emotional as they thanked Allen for his kindness and recognition. Many of them later said that the experience restored their faith in human decency and reminded them that there were still people in the world who understood the value of treating others with respect and appreciation. But Allen was not finished with his response to the discrimination he had experienced. He asked one of the staff members to approach the guests who had been complaining about his presence, inviting them to join a conversation about hospitality, respect, and the values that make communities and institutions successful. When several of the business executives reluctantly approached, clearly uncomfortable with the attention they were receiving and uncertain about what Allen intended to accomplish, he surprised them with his graciousness and intelligence. Rather than confronting them about their prejudiced comments or demanding apologies for their discriminatory behavior, Allen engaged them in a thoughtful conversation about the principles that should guide interactions between people from different backgrounds. He spoke about the importance of treating all people with dignity and respect, regardless of their background, appearance, or cultural markers. His words were thoughtful and articulate, demonstrating an intelligence and sophistication that clearly surprised guests who had assumed he was an unsophisticated intruder who had somehow gained access to exclusive facilities. The conversation revealed that Allen was not the rural stereotype they had imagined, but a successful businessman who had built a multi-million-dollar enterprise while maintaining his authentic cultural identity and personal values. He spoke knowledgeably about the music industry, about business principles, about the importance of staying true to one's values while achieving professional success, and about the cultural traditions that had shaped his character and worldview. His articulate discussion of business and cultural topics challenged the assumptions that had led to the discriminatory treatment, forcing the guests who had judged him to confront their own prejudices and narrow-minded attitudes. The conversation demonstrated that their initial judgments had been based on superficial characteristics rather than actual knowledge of his background, accomplishments, or character. As the conversation continued, other guests began to join the discussion, drawn by curiosity about what was happening, and gradually realizing that they were in the presence of someone who was both more successful and more sophisticated than they had initially understood. The dynamic in the pool area had completely shifted from exclusion and discrimination to inclusion and meaningful dialogue. Someone eventually recognized Allen as a famous country music performer, leading to a broader recognition of his accomplishments and status within the entertainment industry. The revelation of his identity transformed the dynamic completely, as guests who had been dismissive suddenly became eager to engage with someone they now recognized as a legitimate celebrity whose success and wealth exceeded their own. However, Allen's response to this changed attention was consistent with his character throughout the incident. He remained gracious and friendly while making it clear that his worth as a human being was not dependent on his fame or commercial success. He emphasized that the respect and dignity he deserved came from his character and values rather than his celebrity status, and that the same respect should be extended to all people, regardless of their profession or social position. The pool supervisor, who had initially approached Allen about his inappropriate attire, returned to apologize profusely for the misunderstanding, clearly embarrassed by the situation and concerned about potential negative publicity for the resort. Her apology was sincere, but Allen's response was characteristically generous, acknowledging that she had been doing her job as instructed and expressing understanding for the difficult position she had been placed in by discriminatory guest complaints. The atmosphere in the pool area had been completely transformed by Allen's response to the initial discrimination. Guests who had been aloof and exclusive began engaging in more friendly and open conversations with each other and with resort staff. The staff members were clearly energized by the recognition and appreciation they had received, providing even more attentive and enthusiastic service to all guests throughout the remainder of the afternoon. Several guests approached Allen throughout the remainder of the afternoon to apologize for their initial assumptions and to express admiration for the way he had handled the difficult situation. Many of them admitted that they had learned something important about judging people based on appearances and about the value of treating everyone with respect and dignity, regardless of their background or cultural markers. The conversations that developed throughout the afternoon were more substantive and meaningful than the typical small talk that characterized interactions among resort guests. People began sharing stories about their own experiences with prejudice and discrimination, and discussing the importance of creating inclusive environments that welcomed people from diverse backgrounds and cultural traditions. The incident might have ended there, as a private lesson in human decency that was witnessed by a small group of resort guests and staff members. However, one of the staff members who had received Allen's generous tip was so moved by the experience that he decided to share the story with his girlfriend, who worked as a reporter for the Naples Daily News, covering tourism and hospitality in the Southwest Florida area. The reporter, recognizing the human interest value of the story and its potential to inspire positive change in the hospitality industry, contacted Allen's representatives to confirm the details and to request permission to publish an account of what had happened at the resort. The inquiry put Allen in a difficult position, as he was generally reluctant to have his charitable gestures publicized and preferred to keep such acts of generosity private. Initially, Allen was hesitant to have the incident publicized, preferring to keep his charitable gestures private and not wanting to seem like he was seeking positive publicity or trying to exploit a difficult situation for personal gain. His approach to philanthropy and generosity had always been to help people quietly and without fanfare, believing that true generosity should be motivated by genuine concern for others rather than desire for recognition or praise. However, his manager convinced him that the story could have a positive impact by encouraging other people to treat service workers with greater respect and appreciation, while demonstrating that discrimination and prejudice could be overcome through grace and generosity. The message about dignity, respect, and the importance of treating all people fairly was consistent with the values that Allen had always tried to promote through his music and public presence. After careful consideration, Allen agreed to allow the reporter to publish the story, with the understanding that the focus should be on the broader lessons about respect and human dignity, rather than on his personal generosity or celebrity status. He wanted the story to inspire positive change in how people treated service workers and others who might be vulnerable to discrimination based on their appearance or background. When the story was published in the Naples Daily News under the headline, "Country Star's Generosity Transforms Resort Discrimination into Lesson About Human Dignity," it was immediately picked up by larger media outlets, including USA Today, CNN, Entertainment Tonight, and major network news programs. The story resonated with readers and viewers who were moved by Allen's response to discrimination and his generous treatment of working people who were often invisible to wealthy resort guests and similar privileged populations. The media coverage focused not just on the size of Allen's tips, which were certainly newsworthy in their own right, but on the way he had transformed a moment of prejudice and discrimination into an opportunity for education and understanding. Commentary from readers and viewers praised his dignity and grace under pressure, while criticizing the resort culture that had created the discriminatory situation in the first place. The story became a viral sensation on social media platforms, with millions of people sharing accounts of the incident and expressing admiration for Allen's character and values. The hashtag #CowboyBootsInCharacter began trending on Twitter, with users sharing their own stories of being judged based on appearance or background and finding inspiration in Alan's example of responding to prejudice with grace and generosity. Many people shared personal stories of discrimination they had experienced based on their appearance, cultural background, or economic circumstances, and expressed gratitude for Alan's example of how to respond to such treatment with dignity and class. The social media response revealed that discrimination based on appearance and cultural markers was a widespread problem that affected people from many different backgrounds and communities. The impact extended far beyond social media, as the story was featured in major news programs and talk shows that used it as a starting point for discussions about class, prejudice, and the importance of treating all people with dignity, regardless of their background or circumstances. The incident sparked broader conversations about the way service workers were treated in the hospitality industry and the responsibility of guests to show respect and appreciation for the people who made their comfortable experiences possible. Several television programs invited Alan to appear as a guest to discuss the incident and its broader implications, though he generally declined interviews that focused specifically on his personal generosity. When he did agree to appearances, he consistently emphasized that the real message of the story was about the importance of treating all people with respect and dignity, rather than about his individual response to discrimination. The resort management, initially concerned about negative publicity from the discrimination incident and worried about potential damage to their reputation, found themselves receiving positive attention for employing staff members who had been recognized for their professionalism and dedication. The coverage emphasized the quality of the resort's employees while criticizing the discriminatory attitudes of some guests and the management policies that had enabled such treatment. In response to the publicity and the broader conversations it generated about inclusive hospitality, the resort implemented new training programs focused on creating welcoming environments for all guests, regardless of their background or appearance. The training emphasized the importance of treating every guest with equal respect and dignity, while providing excellent service to all patrons regardless of their cultural background or personal style. The staff members who had received Alan's generous tips used the money in ways that reflected their appreciation for his gesture and their understanding of the opportunities it provided. Several of them paid off debts or helped family members with financial challenges that had been creating stress and limiting opportunities for personal and professional growth. Others used the money to pursue educational opportunities that could improve their career prospects, enrolling in community college courses or professional development programs that would qualify them for advancement within the hospitality industry. One staff member used the money to help his daughter pay for college tuition, while another was able to make a down payment on a reliable car that improved her ability to get to work consistently. All of the staff members spoke about the experience as a reminder that their work had value and that they deserved to be treated with respect and appreciation by the guests they served. Many of them said that Alan's recognition had restored their confidence and motivation, reminding them that hospitality work was honorable and important rather than simply a temporary job to be endured. The incident had ripple effects throughout the hospitality industry, as other luxury resorts and hotels examined their own policies and staff training to ensure that all guests were treated with equal respect and dignity, regardless of their appearance or cultural background. Industry publications featured articles about inclusive hospitality and the business benefits of creating welcoming environments for all guests. Professional organizations within the hospitality industry began developing new standards and training programs focused on preventing discrimination and promoting inclusive service that would welcome guests from diverse backgrounds. The incident became a case study in hospitality education programs, demonstrating the importance of treating all guests with equal respect while providing excellent service to everyone regardless of their personal style or cultural markers. For Alan personally, the incident reinforced his commitment to the values that had guided his life and career from the beginning. He had always believed that success should be measured not just by professional accomplishments or financial wealth, but by the way one treated other people, especially those who were in positions of less power or privilege. The experience also strengthened his connection to his authentic cultural identity, reminding him that his rural background and values were not something to be hidden or apologized for, but sources of strength and wisdom that could make positive contributions to any situation. The cowboy boots that had triggered the initial discrimination became symbols of authenticity and integrity that resonated with fans and admirers around the world. In interviews following the incident, Alan consistently emphasized that his response had not been calculated for publicity or effect. but had come naturally from the values his parents had taught him about treating all people with dignity and respect. He spoke about the importance of remembering that everyone has value and deserves to be treated with kindness, regardless of their position in social or economic hierarchies. The story continued to resonate years later, often being cited as an example of how individuals can respond to prejudice and discrimination in ways that promote understanding and positive change. It became part of Alan's legacy, demonstrating that his success in country music was matched by his character and integrity as a human being who used his influence to promote positive values and social justice. The resort where the incident occurred eventually invited Alan to return as an honored guest, offering him a permanent suite and requesting his input on staff training programs focused on inclusive hospitality. While Alan appreciated the gesture and the changes the resort had implemented, he chose to vacation at more modest destinations that reflected his authentic preferences and values. The pool area where the discrimination had occurred was eventually redesigned to include a plaque recognizing the importance of treating all guests with dignity and respect. Though Alan had not requested such recognition and remained characteristically modest about his role in promoting positive change. The plaque read simply, "Excellence in hospitality means welcoming all guests with equal dignity and respect," a message that reflected the lessons learned from that transformative afternoon. Years later, when hospitality industry professionals discussed watershed moments in the evolution of inclusive service standards, the incident at the Ritz-Carlton Naples was often cited as a crucial turning point. Alan's response had demonstrated that grace and generosity could be more effective than anger or legal action in promoting understanding and positive change, while also showing that authentic character could triumph over superficial prejudices. The young staff members who had witnessed Alan's generosity often shared the story with new employees during orientation and training sessions, using it as an example of how one person's character and values could transform a difficult situation into an opportunity for growth and understanding. Many of them went on to leadership positions in the hospitality industry, carrying forward the lessons they had learned about respect, dignity, and inclusive service that welcomed guests from all backgrounds. The incident also had a profound impact on the guests who had initially discriminated against Alan, forcing them to confront their own prejudices and assumptions about people from different cultural backgrounds. Several of them later sought him out to express their gratitude for the lesson he had taught them about character and human dignity, acknowledging that the experience had changed their perspective on judging others based on superficial characteristics. Marcus Williams, one of the business executives who had made disparaging comments about country people, later wrote a letter to Alan apologizing for his behavior and describing how the incident had led him to examine his own attitudes and prejudices. He explained that he had grown up in an urban environment with limited exposure to rural culture, leading him to develop stereotypical views that were based on ignorance rather than actual experience or knowledge. The letter revealed that Williams had since made efforts to educate himself about country music and rural American culture, developing an appreciation for the authentic values and artistic traditions that he had previously dismissed. He had also changed his own behavior when traveling, making conscious efforts to treat service workers with greater respect and appreciation, while avoiding the kind of judgmental attitudes that had characterized his previous approach to people from different backgrounds. Patricia Henderson, the woman who had suggested that Alan might be more comfortable at the family pool, also reached out to express her regret about the incident and her admiration for his gracious response. She explained that she had been raised in an environment of privilege and exclusivity that had taught her to view certain types of people as inherently inferior or inappropriate for upscale environments. Henderson's reflection on the incident had led her to question many of her assumptions about social class, cultural background, and the criteria that should determine a person's worth or appropriateness for different social situations. She had begun volunteering with organizations that served working-class communities, finding fulfillment in relationships that crossed traditional social boundaries and challenged her previous worldview. The ripple effects of Alan's response extended far beyond the immediate participants in the incident, influencing hospitality policies and practices at luxury resorts throughout the United States and internationally. The Ritz-Carlton Company implemented system-wide training programs focused on inclusive hospitality, using the Naples incident as a case study in how discriminatory attitudes could damage both individual guests and the company's reputation. Other luxury hotel chains followed suit, developing their own training programs and policy changes designed to ensure that all guests were treated with equal respect and dignity, regardless of their appearance, cultural background, or personal style. The hospitality industry began to recognize that inclusive service was not just morally right, but also good business, as it expanded their potential customer base while creating more positive experiences for all guests. The incident also influenced academic research and education in hospitality management programs, with business schools incorporating case studies about the Naples incident into their curricula. Students studying hotel and resort management learned about the importance of inclusive service and the business risks associated with discriminatory practices, while also examining the leadership qualities that Allen had demonstrated in his response to unfair treatment. Professor Maria Rodriguez at the Cornell School of Hotel Administration developed a comprehensive case study based on the incident, using it to teach students about conflict resolution, customer service excellence, and the importance of organizational culture in creating inclusive environments. The case study became one of the most popular and effective teaching tools in the program, generating meaningful discussions about prejudice, dignity, and the responsibility of hospitality professionals. The media attention generated by the incident also led to increased scrutiny of discriminatory practices in other industries and institutions, with journalists and activists using Allen's example to highlight similar problems in restaurants, retail establishments, private clubs, and other businesses that served the public. The story became a catalyst for broader conversations about equality, respect, and the treatment of people from different cultural backgrounds. Several documentaries and television specials featured the incident as part of broader examinations of class and cultural prejudice in American society. These programs used Allen's story to illustrate both the persistence of discriminatory attitudes and the potential for individual actions to create positive change, inspiring viewers to examine their own assumptions and behaviors. The Country Music Association recognized the broader significance of Allen's response by presenting him with a special humanitarian award that honored not just his charitable giving, but his demonstration of the values that country music aspired to represent. The award citation praised his gracious response to discrimination that demonstrated the power of character and generosity to overcome prejudice and create positive change. In his acceptance speech, Allen emphasized that the real heroes of the story were the resort staff members who had continued to provide excellent service, despite sometimes being treated poorly by guests who failed to recognize their worth and dignity. He used the platform to encourage other successful people to show appreciation for service workers and to remember that treating others with respect was not dependent on their social status or economic position. The speech, which was broadcast nationally and shared widely on social media, reinforced the key messages that had emerged from the original incident while demonstrating Allen's continued commitment to the values that had guided his response. His words resonated with audiences who saw in his example a model for how to use success and influence to promote positive change rather than simply accumulating wealth and status. Young musicians and entertainers often cited Allen's example when discussing how to maintain authentic values while achieving commercial success in industries that could be superficial and image-focused. His demonstration that authenticity and integrity could coexist with professional achievement provided inspiration for artists who wanted to succeed without compromising their character or abandoning their cultural roots. The incident became particularly meaningful to country music fans and artists who had experienced similar discrimination based on their cultural background or regional identity. Many people shared stories of being judged or dismissed because of their accents, clothing, or cultural markers. Finding validation and inspiration in Allen's example of responding to such treatment with dignity and grace. Sarah Mitchell, a young country singer from rural Tennessee, later credited Allen's example with giving her the confidence to maintain her authentic identity while pursuing success in Nashville's competitive music industry. She explained that seeing how he had responded to discrimination while staying true to his values had shown her that she did not need to change who she was to succeed in the entertainment business. The story also resonated internationally, with media outlets in other countries using it to discuss their own issues with cultural prejudice and class discrimination. The incident became a symbol of how individual actions could challenge discriminatory attitudes while promoting greater understanding and respect between different communities and social groups. The economic impact of the incident was also significant, as the positive publicity generated increased interest in Allen's music and led to higher concert attendance and album sales. However, more importantly for Allen, the response demonstrated that audiences valued authenticity and character as much as musical talent, validating his decision to maintain his genuine identity throughout his career. The resort industry's response to the incident also had economic implications. as properties that implemented inclusive hospitality policies found that they attracted broader customer bases while generating more positive reviews and word-of-mouth recommendations. The business case for inclusive service became increasingly clear as companies recognized that discriminatory practices could damage their reputation and limit their market potential. Training programs developed in response to the incident were eventually adopted by hospitality organizations worldwide, creating new standards for service excellence that emphasized respect and dignity for all guests. The programs included modules on cultural competency, bias recognition, and conflict resolution that helped employees provide better service while avoiding discriminatory practices. The incident also influenced government policy discussions about discrimination in public accommodations, with some legislators citing Allen's story as evidence of the need for stronger enforcement of anti-discrimination laws. While the incident had been resolved through private action rather than legal intervention, it highlighted the ongoing existence of discriminatory attitudes that could affect anyone regardless of their status or achievements. Civil rights organizations use the story to illustrate how discrimination could affect successful and accomplished individuals, demonstrating that prejudice was not limited to traditional targets, but could impact anyone who displayed cultural markers that were viewed negatively by certain groups. The incident provided a powerful example for education and advocacy efforts aimed at promoting greater equality and respect. The lasting impact of that July afternoon in Naples continued to influence discussions about dignity, respect, and the treatment of service workers years after the original incident. The story became a touchstone for conversations about how to respond to discrimination and prejudice in ways that promoted understanding rather than division, education rather than confrontation. Allen's cowboy boots, which had triggered the original discrimination, became symbols of authenticity and integrity that inspired countless people to embrace their own cultural identities while treating others with respect and dignity. The boots represented the idea that external appearances should not determine a person's worth or their right to equal treatment in public accommodations. The transformation of that afternoon from a moment of humiliation and discrimination into an opportunity for positive change demonstrated the power of individual character to influence broader social attitudes and institutional practices. Allen's response had not just defended his own dignity, but had created lasting improvements in how an entire industry approached the treatment of guests and the recognition of human worth. The pool area at the Ritz-Carlton Naples, where the incident had occurred, became a symbol of the possibility for positive change and the importance of treating all people with dignity and respect. Staff members often pointed out the location to new employees while sharing the story of how one man's gracious response to discrimination had transformed not just that moment, but the entire approach to hospitality at their resort. The legacy of that transformative afternoon extended far beyond the original participants, inspiring millions of people to examine their own attitudes and behaviors, while demonstrating that individual actions could create ripple effects that influenced institutions, industries, and communities. Allen Jackson's cowboy boots had indeed made him stand out at the exclusive resort, but not for the reasons his critics had imagined. They had marked him as someone whose authentic character and values were strong enough to transform discrimination into understanding, prejudice into respect, and a moment of humiliation into an inspiring example of how to respond to unfair treatment with grace, generosity, and unwavering dignity. The tip that made headlines was not just about the money he had given to hardworking staff members, but about the values he had demonstrated and the positive change he had created through his response to an unjust situation. Years later, the incident remained a powerful reminder that true success was measured not by wealth or status, but by character and the way one treated other people, especially those who were vulnerable to discrimination or mistreatment. Allen's response had shown that the best way to combat prejudice was not through anger or retaliation, but through demonstrating the very qualities that bigotry sought to deny: dignity, grace, generosity, and an unwavering commitment to treating all people with respect and appreciation. The story of what happened at that Florida resort pool became more than just an anecdote about celebrity generosity. It became a lasting testament to the transformative power of character and the possibility that individual actions could create positive change that extended far beyond their original context. Through his response to discrimination, Allen had not just defended his own dignity, but had created a legacy that continued to inspire people to treat others with greater respect, appreciation, and understanding.